My parents told me dinner was canceled because they were broke, but when I arrived at the restaurant, I discovered them feasting without me at my expense. I gave them a surprise they will never forget. They stopped talking and started begging me. I'm James Parker. I'm 32 years old, and I discovered my family, who claimed to be broke, was secretly feasting at a 5-star restaurant using my corporate account. Before I tell you how I turned the tables and made them beg, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It started, as it so often did, with a phone call from my father. His voice on the other end of the line was heavy with a practiced sigh, a sound I knew as well as my own heartbeat. It was the sound of an apology before the crime had even been committed. "James, son," he started, the static on the line barely masking the weariness in his tone. "I'm afraid we have to cancel the anniversary dinner tomorrow." I leaned back in my office chair, the skyline of the city a blur of lights outside my window. "Cancel? Why? I've already made the reservations at Oakwood Grill. Is everything okay?" "It's your mother," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She's just completely exhausted, run down. And to be honest, son, we're completely broke this month. Just tapped out. A fancy dinner like that, we just can't." I felt the familiar pull, the reflexive urge to fix it. "Dad, that's not a problem. You know I can help. Let me cover it. It's your 35th anniversary. It's a big deal." No, he insisted a little too quickly. "Your mother's got her heart set on a quiet night in. Just the two of us. Don't you worry about it. We appreciate the thought, though." We ended the call, and I sat there in the silence of my office, a familiar, bitter taste in my mouth. It was a story I'd heard 100 times. Exhausted, broke, tapped out. Yet somehow my help was never the solution they wanted. The next evening, I was wrapping up a late project when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin, Alex. He was the only one in the family who seemed to see things clearly, the only one who didn't look at me and see a walking wallet. The text had no words, just a picture. My heart stopped. It was a photo taken from across a crowded restaurant. The lighting was warm, the decor unmistakable. It was Oakwood Grill, and at a large central table my entire family was seated. My exhausted mother was laughing, a glass of champagne held high. My broke father was gesturing to a waiter, ordering what looked like another expensive bottle of wine. My younger brother, Michael, and his wife, Sarah, were there, smiling and showing off something on their wrists. Even my aunt and uncle from out of state were there. And then I saw it. The caption Alex had finally sent through. "Thought you'd be here tonight?" The air left my lungs. A cold, heavy fury settled in my chest. I grabbed my keys, my briefcase, and walked out of the office without a word to anyone. The drive through the rain-slicked city streets was a blur. My mind was a storm of past hurts and fresh betrayal. I parked across the street from the restaurant, and through the large glass window, I saw the scene with my own eyes. It was real. They were all there, and as my father raised his glass for a toast, I could almost hear the words through the thick pane of glass, words that would become the final nail in the coffin of the man I used to be. I saw his lips form the words as he beamed at my brother, and especially to Michael, the son I can always count on. The knot in my stomach tightened into a ball of ice. I took one last, deep breath, the cold night air stinging my lungs. My anger was gone, replaced by something much colder, much clearer. I straightened my tie, smoothed down my suit jacket, and started walking towards the door. The time for feeling hurt was over. The time for action had begun. The walk from the heavy oak door of the Oakwood Grill to my family's table felt like a mile. With every step on the plush carpet, a different memory, a different betrayal, played out in my mind like a movie I was forced to watch. The smiling hostess tried to greet me, but I barely saw her. My focus was a laser beam locked onto that table. My feet moved forward, but my mind plunged backward. A year ago, I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table, the same table where I'd done my homework as a kid. But instead of textbooks, the surface was covered in a sea of red-stamped envelopes and credit card statements. $45,000. That was the total. A mountain of debt built from frivolous purchases, small luxuries, and a complete refusal to live within their means. I remembered the look on my father's face, not of shame, but of weary impatience. "We just got a little behind, son," he'd said, not meeting my eyes. "Behind." I had pushed the statements across the table. "Dad, this is a cruise to the Bahamas. This is a new television. These are designer handbags for Mom. This isn't behind. This is reckless." That's when my mother, Linda, had started. Her eyes welled up with perfectly formed tears, her lower lip trembling just so. It was a performance she had perfected over decades. "Oh, James," she'd whispered, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. The stress. Your father's heart condition. I just needed a little something to feel normal." She put her hand on his arm. "We were going to tell you. We promise this is the last time. We'll be more responsible. We just need a little help to get back on our feet." I had a choice then. I could have walked away. I should have walked away. I was a financial executive. I advised people on fiscal responsibility every single day. But this wasn't a client. This was my mother crying. This was my father, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen him. So I did what I always did. I pulled out my checkbook. I wrote a check that cleared their entire debt. I gave them a lecture about budgeting, about living within their means. They nodded, they promised, they hugged me. And as I left their house that night, I felt a knot of dread, a sinking feeling that I hadn't solved a problem. I just financed the next one. The memory faded, replaced by another, more recent one. 6 months ago, a frantic call from my brother, Michael. "James, you gotta help me, man. They're gonna take my car." It was the third time. The third time he'd missed so many payments on a luxury sedan. He couldn't afford that the bank was sending a tow truck. The first 2 times, I'd given him the money, along with a stern warning. This time, I'd been determined to let him face the consequences. I had driven to his apartment complex, planning to give him a ride to the bus station to talk to him about financial reality. But when I got there, I found him on the curb, his wife Sarah beside him, her arm wrapped around his. Sarah, who always greeted me with the sweetest smile, who always told me how grateful they were for my help. "He's just devastated, James," she'd said, her voice soft and full of concern. "He needs the car for his job interviews. How is he supposed to get his life back on track without a car?" Michael just stood there, kicking at a loose stone on the pavement, the picture of a kicked puppy. "I messed up, bro. I know. It won't happen again." And as I hesitated, looking at my coddled younger brother, the golden child who could do no wrong, Sarah delivered the final blow. She leaned in and whispered to Michael, just loud enough for me to hear, "Just ask him, honey. Just ask your brother. He's family. He always says yes to family." It was brilliant manipulation. It wasn't a demand. It was a statement of fact, a reminder of my role, the fixer, the bank, the one who always says yes. I ended up at the dealership an hour later, co-signing yet another loan, trapping myself further in the web of his irresponsibility. As we left, Michael was ecstatic, already talking about the new sound system he wanted to install. He never once said thank you. My stride grew more confident as I approached the table. These memories weren't making me weak. They were forging my anger into steel. I remembered a phone call from a few weeks ago with my cousin Alex. He was the only one who got it. "You're a good guy, James," Alex had said. "But you're not a bank. You know that, right? They're walking all over you." "It's complicated, Alex," I'd replied, the weak excuse tasting like ash in my mouth. "No, it's not," he'd shot back. "You work your ass off. Michael plays video games and complains about not finding the right job. Your parents are living better than I am, and I know for a fact your dad's pension is more than my salary. You're enabling them. It's not helping, it's hurting." He was right. I knew he was right. And the proof was sitting right in front of me, laughing over a $200 bottle of wine they'd claimed they couldn't afford. The most painful memory of all hit me just as I reached the edge of their table. It was from just after I'd paid off that $45,000 debt. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off some paperwork. I came in through the back door, and I heard my mother on the phone in the living room, her voice light and gossipy. She was talking to my Aunt Carol. "Oh, I know," my mother was saying, followed by a theatrical sigh. "James is just so difficult sometimes, so analytical. Everything is about numbers with him. There's no warmth, you know? He doesn't understand the pressures we're under. He's not as generous as people think." I froze in the hallway, my hand on the doorknob. The check I had written, the check that had literally saved them from financial ruin, was probably still sitting on the desk not 20 feet from where she stood. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't about the money. It was never just about the money. It was about respect. And in that moment, I understood that they had none for me. I was a tool, a function, a means to an end. I backed out of the house that day without making a sound. I never told them I'd heard. I just buried it. Another log on the pyre of resentment that was now burning white-hot inside me. All these thoughts, all these moments of pain and humiliation, flashed through my mind in the 10 seconds it took me to cross the restaurant floor. By the time I arrived at their table, the ghosts of the past were standing right behind me. They had fueled a change within me, a change that my family was about to experience firsthand. I pulled up an empty chair from a nearby table, the sound of its legs scraping lightly against the floor. The laughter at the table died instantly. Every head turned towards me. My mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. My father's jovial face went slack with shock. Michael looked like a deer caught in the headlights. "James?" my father stammered, his voice a choked whisper. What are you doing here?" I placed my hands on the table, leaned forward slightly, and gave them a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Funny you should ask," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I was in the neighborhood, and I could have sworn you said you were having a quiet night in." The silence that fell over the table was heavier than a tombstone. You could hear a pin drop over the ambient chatter of the restaurant. My mother slowly, carefully, placed her champagne glass back on the white tablecloth, her hand trembling slightly. Sarah, Michael's wife, shot a panicked look at my brother, her own smile frozen on her face. My father was the first to recover, or at least to try. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie, a nervous habit I knew well. "Well, this is a surprise. Son, we were just having a small, last-minute get-together. Your aunt and uncle insisted. We were going to call you." A lie, so blatant, so pathetic, it was almost insulting. "Really?" I said, my voice still even. I turned my gaze to my mother. "I'm so glad you're feeling better, Mom. When Dad told me you were completely exhausted, I was worried. You seem to have made a miraculous recovery." My mother, Linda, flinched as if I'd slapped her. She couldn't meet my eyes. She just stared down at her plate, her face flushed with a mixture of guilt and anger. "It was a sudden burst of energy," she mumbled. "I didn't want to disappoint everyone." "Disappoint everyone?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "But you had no problem disappointing me, is that it? Or was it just easier to lie?" Michael, ever the defiant one, decided to jump in. "Hey man, what's your problem? We're just trying to have a nice dinner. Dad said you were busy with work anyway. Did he now?" I kept my eyes locked on my father, who was now sweating visibly under the restaurant's dim lighting. "Is that what you told him, Dad? That I was busy? Or was the part about being completely broke the real story?" Before he could answer, a familiar figure approached the table. It was Marco, a waiter who had served me and my clients dozens of times. He was a professional, always discreet, always efficient. He approached the table with a warm, welcoming smile, holding a new bottle of wine. His smile widened when he saw me. "Mr. Parker, good evening. I didn't realize you'd be joining your family tonight. A pleasant surprise." He turned to my father. "Sir, your Chateau Margaux as requested." As he expertly began to open the $200 bottle of wine, he added casually, "No need to worry about the bill tonight, Mr. Parker. Your family told me you were running late and to just put everything on your corporate account. As usual." Boom. There it was. The first twist of the knife, delivered with the innocent precision of a man just doing his job. I watched as the color drained from my father's face. My mother's head snapped up, her eyes wide with horror. Michael looked from me to our father, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes for the first time. They were caught, not just in a lie but in a flagrant act of theft. Using my corporate account, an account meant for business clients, for their own lavish celebration. I gave the waiter a tight smile. "Thank you, Marco. That's very informative." Marco, sensing the sudden tension, quickly finished opening the wine, poured a small amount for my father to taste, and then beat a hasty retreat. The silence that followed was suffocating. I let it hang in the air for a long moment, watching them squirm. Then, my eyes drifted to my brother's wrist. He instinctively tried to pull his sleeve down, but it was too late. I'd seen the watch clearly. A sleek, silver chronograph. A brand I recognized because I had been looking at the exact same model online just a few weeks ago. "That's a nice watch, Mike," I said, my voice soft. "New." He shrugged, trying to act casual. "Yeah, Sarah got it for me. Anniversary gift." Sarah nodded vigorously, a little too enthusiastically. "That's right. He deserved a little something." I nodded slowly, a cold understanding dawning on me. I thought about the joint credit card I had given my parents. It was in my name with them as authorized users. I'd given it to them with one strict condition. "This is for emergencies only. A medical bill, car repair, true emergencies." I looked straight at my mother. Her face was a mask of strained innocence. "What was the emergency, Mom?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A severe lack of a Swiss timepiece?" Her composure finally cracked. It was on sale," she blurted out. "Michael has been so down, we thought it would be a nice pick-me-up. We were going to pay you back." "Pay me back?" I echoed, the words dripping with sarcasm. "With what? The money you saved by telling me you were too broke for dinner? You used the emergency card to buy a luxury watch for my brother, while simultaneously using my business account to fund this party." I gestured around the table, at the half-eaten plates of filet mignon and lobster, the expensive wine, the smug expressions that had now been replaced with fear and resentment. Michael finally found his voice, and it was laced with the childish anger I knew so well. "So what? You can afford it. It's not a big deal. Why do you always have to make everything about money? You're just trying to ruin our night." "Ruin your night?" I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound was unnaturally loud in the bubble of silence around our table. "Your night was built on a foundation of lies and my money. I didn't ruin it. I just turned on the lights." I looked at each of them one by one. My aunt and uncle, who were now staring intently at their water glasses. Sarah, who refused to meet my gaze. Michael, defiant and red-faced. My mother, looking like she was about to cry again. And my father, who just looked broken. But I felt no pity. Not anymore. "You know what?" I said, my voice returning to that chillingly calm tone. "He's right. I wouldn't want to ruin your celebration." I took a step back from the table. "Please continue. Enjoy the wine. It's already paid for." And with that, I turned my back on them and walked away, not towards the exit, but towards the back of the restaurant, where I knew the manager's office was. I could feel their eyes on my back, a mixture of confusion, relief, and terror. They thought they might have gotten away with it. They had no idea the storm was just beginning. I didn't storm out of the restaurant. I didn't cause a scene. The old James would have. The old James would have yelled, would have argued, would have let his hurt and anger spill out all over the pristine white tablecloths, giving them the satisfaction of painting me as the unstable, overreacting bad guy. But that James was gone. He died somewhere on the drive over here. The man who was now walking purposefully towards the manager's office was someone new. He was calm. He was focused. He was a strategist. I found the manager's office tucked away behind the bustling kitchen. I knocked once. "Come in." I opened the door to find David Thompson sitting behind a large mahogany desk, looking over some spreadsheets. David and I went way back, not just as friends from college, but as business partners of a sort. My financial firm was one of his restaurant's biggest corporate clients. We spent well over $100,000 a year at Oakwood Grill, entertaining high-net-worth individuals and closing deals. He looked up, and a genuine smile spread across his face when he saw me. "James, what a surprise. I saw you come in. Everything all right? Your family looks... well, they look like they're having a good time." He hesitated. "You look like you're not." I closed the door behind me, the noise of the restaurant instantly muffled. "David, I need a favor, and I need your absolute discretion." His smile faded, replaced by a look of serious concern. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Of course. Sit down. What's going on?" I sat, but I didn't relax. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on his desk. "That corporate account my company has with you. I want to close it." David's eyebrows shot up. "Close it? James, that's one of our best accounts. Is there a problem with the service?" "With the food. The service is impeccable as always," I reassured him. "This is a personal matter. As you saw, my family is dining here tonight. They've been using the account, without my knowledge and for non-business purposes. Tonight was the night I found out." A look of dawning comprehension crossed David's face. He was a smart guy, he could read between the lines. He'd seen families like mine before. "I see," he said quietly. "I am so sorry, James. Marco mentioned they said you authorized it." "They lied," I said, my voice flat. "So here's what I need you to do. After I leave tonight, that account is to be permanently closed. No exceptions. And for tonight's bill, I want you to bring it directly to me at the table. Do not present it to my father. Bring it to me." "Of course," David said without hesitation. "Consider it done. Anything else?" I paused, a thought clicking into place. "Don't worry about them being able to afford it," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "I've run the numbers. They'll be fine." It was a seed, a small hint of the storm to come, but David just nodded, accepting my word. "Whatever you need, man," he said, his expression one of solidarity. "Thank you, David." I stood up, shook his hand, and walked out of the office. The walk back to my car was different from the drive there. The anger had cooled, solidified into something hard and purposeful. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to the one place where I could think clearly, the one place where I was in complete control, my office. The building was empty at this hour, the silence broken only by the hum of the servers. I sat down at my desk, the panoramic view of the city's lights spread out before me like a carpet of diamonds. But I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at the glowing monitors of my computer. For the next 2 hours, I worked with a focus I usually reserved for multimillion-dollar mergers. But this wasn't about business. This was a forensic accounting of my own life, of my family's deception. I opened my banking apps, my credit card statements, my investment portfolios. I started building a spreadsheet. Column by column, I laid it all out. The monthly mortgage payments for their house that were automatically debited from my account, $2,500. The car payments for Michael's sedan, also on autodraft from my checking, $650. Their property taxes, which I paid twice a year, totaling $8,000 annually. The joint emergency credit card. I scrolled through the statement, my jaw tightening with every line item. Dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, online shopping sprees, spa days for my mother. And there it was 2 weeks ago, a charge for $2,800 from a high-end jeweler. The watch. I kept digging. I was a financial executive. I knew where to look. I did a soft credit pull on my parents, something I had the right to do as a cosigner on their mortgage. I found their income sources, my father's pension, my mother's part-time consulting gig that she always downplayed. I cross-referenced it with their tax filings from the previous year. The numbers began to form a picture, and it was a masterpiece of fraud. Their combined monthly income, without a single dollar from me, was $7,200. I started a new spreadsheet, essential expenses. I estimated their real mortgage cost without my subsidy, their utilities, groceries, car insurance, gas. I was generous. The total came to $4,100. That left them with a surplus of $3,100 every single month. Over $37,000 a year of their own money before my contributions. And yet, they were completely broke. I even went on their social media. My mother's Facebook was a carefully curated gallery of hardship, full of vague posts about tough times and counting blessings. But my cousin's page told a different story. Tagged photos from a weekend getaway to a wine country resort 2 months ago. A trip my mother had told me was a staycation at home. I saved every statement. I screenshot every post. I printed every document. I organized them neatly in a thick, black binder. I created charts and graphs. I laid out their income versus their real expenses. I highlighted the thousands of dollars they spent on luxuries while claiming poverty to me. I was no longer their son. I was their auditor, and I had just uncovered a level of embezzlement that would make my most hardened corporate clients blush. By the time I was finished, the first hints of dawn were creeping over the horizon. I leaned back in my chair, the thick binder sitting on the desk in front of me. It was a weapon, a declaration of independence. I drove home, showered, and put on a fresh suit. I felt a strange sense of peace. The confusion was gone. The hurt was cauterized. All that was left was a cold, hard resolve. I knew what I had to do. The plan was no longer just about cutting them off. It was about showing them that the game was over because I finally knew all the rules. I grabbed the binder, put it in my briefcase, and headed back to my parents' neighborhood. It was time to pay the bill. When I walked back into the Oakwood Grill, the breakfast crowd was starting to trickle in. My family was still at their table, though the celebratory mood had long since evaporated. They looked tired and anxious, nursing coffees in a tense silence. They all looked up as I approached. I didn't say a word. I just caught David's eye across the room. He gave me a subtle nod. A moment later, he approached the table, holding a small, leather-bound bill folder. He walked right past my father and placed it on the table directly in front of me. "Your bill, Mr. Parker," he said formally. I opened it. The total was $1,212. I took out my personal credit card, not the corporate one, and placed it in the folder. I didn't flinch. David took it and walked away. The silence from my family was absolute. They were watching my every move, trying to figure out what was happening. When David returned with the receipt, I signed it, adding a generous tip for Marco. I stood up, put my copy of the receipt in my pocket, and looked at my family for what felt like the last time. "This," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the morning calm of the restaurant, "is the last meal," and I walked out the door, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their long, elaborate lie. The next morning, I woke up to a sunrise that felt different. Felt like the first day of the rest of my life. I made coffee, sat on my balcony overlooking the city, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the familiar weight of my family's financial burdens on my shoulders. I felt light. My phone started buzzing at 8:05 a.m. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from my parents' town. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. It was from my mother. "James, the mortgage company just called. They said the automatic payment didn't go through. There must be some mistake. Please call me back. This is serious." I read the message, took a slow sip of my coffee, and deleted it. At 9:30 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Michael. I ignored it. A string of frantic texts followed immediately after. "Dude, where are you? They're towing my car. Right now. From my driveway. The repo guy is here. He said the payments stopped. What did you do? Answer your phone." I took a screenshot of the texts, saved it to a folder on my computer labeled consequences, and then blocked his number. The rest of the morning was a symphony of their self-inflicted chaos, all playing out on my phone's screen. 10:15 a.m. An email notification from my credit card company. A charge from Fresh Market Grocers for $212.45 had been declined. The authorized user, Linda Parker. I imagined my mother at the checkout, her cart full of organic produce and expensive cheeses, her face turning red as the cashier told her the card was no good. 11 a.m. A voicemail from my father. His voice was strained, trying to sound calm but failing miserably. Son, there seems to be a major issue with all our accounts. I think your identity might have been stolen. We need you to sort this out immediately. Call me. Identity theft. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. They were the ones who had stolen my financial identity, turning me into their personal slush fund. I deleted the voicemail. By noon, the final piece fell into place. A forwarded email from my mother. It was a final notice from the utility company. Their electricity would be shut off in 48 hours if the overdue balance wasn't paid. The balance that I usually handled without them even having to ask. For 3 days, I let them marinate in the world they had created. I went to work. I met friends for dinner. I slept soundly. I didn't answer a single one of their calls, texts, or frantic emails. I needed them to understand that the bank was closed. The lines of communication were down. The safety net was gone. On the third day, I sent a simple text to my father from a new, untraceable number. Be at my apartment tomorrow at 10 a.m. All of you, if you want to understand what's happening, be there. They arrived at 9:55 a.m. The full set. My father, Robert, his face pale and drawn. My mother, Linda, her eyes red and puffy, clutching a tissue in her hand. And my brother, Michael, looking sullen and angry. His wife Sarah clinging to his arm as if for support. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck, washed up on the shores of reality. I let them into my apartment, a place they'd only been to a handful of times, usually for a holiday meal they expected me to cook and pay for. I didn't offer them coffee or water. I simply gestured to the 4 chairs I had arranged opposite my large dining table. They sat down cautiously. My father, of course, spoke first. James, thank God. He began, his voice raspy. There's been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding with all the accounts. The bank, the credit cards. I held up a hand, and he fell silent. There is no misunderstanding, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. I reached down beside my chair and lifted the thick, black binder, placing it on the table with a heavy, definitive thud. The sight of it seemed to suck the air out of the room. They stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. I believe this belongs to you, I said. Or rather, it's about you. I opened the binder. The first page was a color-coded pie chart. Let's stop talking about misunderstandings, I said, my eyes scanning each of their faces, and start talking about numbers, because numbers don't lie. I tapped the chart. This is your combined monthly income, $7,200. That's your father's pension and your mother's consulting work. This is money that you earn, all on your own, before I give you a single cent. I saw a flicker of defiance in my mother's eyes. We have expenses, James. The mortgage, the taxes. I'm so glad you brought that up, I said, turning the page. It was a detailed spreadsheet. These are your actual necessary expenses. Your real mortgage payment, not the subsidized one I've been paying. Utilities. Groceries based on a generous $500 a month budget, not the $800 you've been spending. Insurance. Gas. The total comes to $4,100 a month. I leaned forward. That leaves you with a surplus of $3,100 every single month. While telling me you were completely broke, I started turning the pages one by one. Each page was a new piece of evidence. Here's the statement for the emergency credit card. A $2,800 watch for Michael. Is that an emergency? I looked at my brother, whose face had gone from sullen to ghost white. Here are the photos from your quiet staycation, which was actually a 3-day trip to a Napa Valley resort, tagged by Aunt Carol. You forgot about that, didn't you? And here, I said, turning to the last section, is a summary of my contributions to this family over the last 5 years alone. Mortgage subsidies, bailed out car loans, paid off credit card debt, property taxes. I tapped the final number at the bottom of the page. It comes to just over $250,000, $250,000, while you had $37,000 a year in disposable income that you never told me about. The room was utterly silent. The binder lay open on the table, a testament to their years of deceit. The lies, the manipulation, the entitlement. It was all there, laid bare in black and white. My mother finally broke the silence. A sob escaped her lips. "But how are we supposed to survive?" she cried, the tears now flowing freely. "Your father's medication alone is $86 for the generic option." I finished for her, my voice cold as ice. "I checked. The brand name version you've been buying is $400. Another luxury you can no longer afford." The fight finally surged in Michael. "You can't just do this," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You can't just cut us off. We're your family." "No, Michael," I said, standing up, my voice ringing with a finality that echoed in the silent apartment. "You're not. A family doesn't treat one of its own like a bank. A family doesn't lie and cheat and steal. You stopped being my family a long time ago. I was just too blind to see it." I closed the binder. The audit was over. The judgment had been delivered. The echoes of my final words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Michael stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, the angry retort he was about to make dying on his lips. For the first time in his life, he had no comeback. There was nothing he could say. The evidence was irrefutable, laid out in the black binder that sat between us like a judge. My mother's sobs subsided into quiet, hitched breaths. My father just sat there, looking at his hands on the table. He looked old, not just tired, but ancient, as if the weight of all his deceptions had finally settled onto his shoulders, crushing him. I walked over to my desk and picked up a simple manila folder. It was thin, a stark contrast to the thick binder of their lies. I placed it on the table in front of my father. "There's no misunderstanding," I repeated softly. "There is only the truth. And the truth is, the arrangement we had is over. Permanently." My father finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "Son, please, we made a mistake. Terrible mistake. We're sorry. We'll include you in everything from now on, I promise." "That's the problem, Dad," I said, shaking my head. The plea felt hollow, a desperate, last-ditch effort to reconnect the ATM. "You only want me for what I can provide. Your inclusion has a price tag, and I'm no longer willing to pay it." I tapped the manila folder. Inside this folder is a financial plan. It's a simple budget, based on your actual income and necessary expenses. It shows you how you can live, pay your bills, and even save a little money every month. Without my help. I pushed it closer to him. "I've paid this month's mortgage. Consider it a final gift, a severance package. After that, you are on your own. The house, the cars, the bills. It's all yours to manage." I then slid a single business card across the table. "This is the number for a non-profit credit counseling service. They can help you consolidate your remaining debts and learn how to manage your finances responsibly. That is the only help I will be offering from now on." This was the final boundary. I wasn't leaving them to starve. I was giving them the tools for survival. But I was removing myself as the tool. Sarah, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke, her voice a venomous whisper. "You would do this to your own mother? Your own brother?" I met her gaze. "I'm not doing anything to them," I corrected her. "I'm simply stopping what I've been doing for them. There's a difference." I walked to the front door of my apartment and opened it. The hallway outside was bright, a stark contrast to the dim, heavy atmosphere in the room. "I think this meeting is over," I said. "I would like you to leave now." They stood up like robots, slow and stiff. My mother wouldn't look at me. Michael shot me a look of pure hatred, but it was impotent. He had no power here. My father was the last to stand. He picked up the manila folder and the business card, his hands trembling. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say. They filed out of my apartment one by one. I watched them go, the disgraced patriarch, the weeping manipulator, the dethroned prince, and his silent consort. I closed the door behind them, the soft click of the lock echoing in the silence. I stood there for a long moment, my back against the door. I expected to feel a surge of triumph, a rush of vindication. But I didn't. I didn't feel anger or sadness either. I felt nothing. A vast, quiet, peaceful emptiness. The constant noise in the back of my head, the worry, the resentment, the responsibility was gone. The silence was absolute. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. It looked the same, but my world had fundamentally shifted. I had spent years, my entire adult life, trying to earn my family's love and respect by being their provider, their savior, their ever-reliable solution. And all I had gotten in return was contempt. I took out my phone. I went through my contacts. Robert Parker, Linda Parker, Michael Parker, Sarah Parker. I blocked them all. Then, I sent a text to my cousin Alex. "It's done." His reply came back almost instantly. "Good. Now go live your life." And for the first time, I felt like I finally could. The storm had passed. The wreckage was their problem now. I was standing on solid ground. The 6 months that followed were a revelation. It was like waking up from a long, feverish dream. The world looked sharper, brighter. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my companion for years simply vanished. I had more time, more energy, and, I was stunned to realize, significantly more money in my own bank account. I used that time and energy to reinvest in the one person I had neglected for a decade, myself. I took on a challenging new project at work, one I would have passed on before because it required travel and longer hours. Time I would have felt guilty for not dedicating to my family's latest crisis. I poured myself into it and I excelled. 3 months in, there was a company-wide awards dinner. It was a black tie affair at a downtown hotel. My boss called my name for the Employee of the Year award. As I walked up to the stage to a round of applause from my colleagues, I saw my friend and coworker, Mark, and my cousin, Alex, at my table, both of them beaming, giving me a standing ovation. They were my real family, the people who saw my worth, not my wallet. The recognition from my peers, the genuine respect in my boss's eyes as he shook my hand, it felt more validating than anything my family had ever given me. I realized with a pang that if my old life had continued, I would have skipped this event, probably to fix a plumbing issue at my parents' house or to listen to Michael complain about his dead-end job. Life changed for them, too. I didn't seek out information, but it trickled in through Alex. Michael had to sell his precious sedan. Alex saw him on the city bus one morning, staring out the window with a bitter expression. My parents had sold my mother's second car and were now a one-vehicle household. They had put their house on the market, planning to downsize to a small condo on the other side of town. They were learning, slowly and painfully, to live within their means. One Saturday morning, an unknown number popped up on my phone. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello." It was my father. His voice was different, quieter, stripped of its usual blustering confidence. "James? It's Dad. I got your new number from Alex. He said it would be okay to call." I was silent for a moment. "What do you want, Dad?" Your mother and I, we were wondering if you would meet us for coffee. Just to talk. No requests, no agenda, just coffee." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I needed to see it for myself. We met at a small, unassuming diner, the kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that cost $2. A universe away from the Oakwood Grill. They were already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth by the window. They looked smaller. My father wore a simple polo shirt, my mother a plain blouse. They had arrived in a 10-year-old sedan, a practical, sensible car. The performance was over. This was the reality. The conversation was stilted at first. Awkward small talk about the weather, about my work. I kept my answers brief, polite but distant. Finally, my father took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. "We were wrong, son," he said. His voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "We didn't see you. We saw a solution, a safety net. We took everything you gave us for granted, and we never gave you the one thing you deserved." our respect. We're trying to change. We're going to the credit counseling service you recommended. It's hard, but we're trying." My mother nodded, tears welling in her eyes, but for the first time, they looked real. "We miss our son," she whispered. I felt a flicker of something, a tiny, fragile spark. Maybe this was real. Maybe they had learned. But then, my father continued, and that tiny spark was extinguished. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "You know," he said, "it was your mother's idea. The corporate card. She was the one who said, 'Let's just try it. He'll never notice.' She thought it was for the good of the family to keep up appearances. And I was weak. I just went along with it." He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for a reaction. Maybe if you could find it in your heart to help me, just me, we could start over. You and I could make things right." And there it was, the final, bitter truth. It wasn't a genuine confession. It was a strategy, a desperate, last-ditch attempt to salvage a financial lifeline by throwing his wife of over 35 years under the bus. He was trying to cut her out, to position himself as the lesser of two evils, the one worthy of being saved. He hadn't changed. He had just changed his tactics. The last vestiges of my anger, my hurt, my hope, they all dissolved into a quiet, profound disappointment. I looked at my father, this man who had taught me how to throw a baseball, and I saw a stranger. A weak, manipulative man who would betray anyone, even his own wife, to get what he wanted. I slowly stood up from the booth. The coffee was still untouched. "I have to go," I said, my voice flat. "James, wait," my mother pleaded. I looked at her, then back at my father. "I need more time," I said, the words feeling utterly final. "A lot more time." I dropped a $10 bill on the table to cover the coffee and walked out of the diner without looking back. As I drove away from the diner, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see them sitting in that booth, two people trapped in a prison of their own making. For years, I had been their warden, their banker, and their prisoner all at the same time. Now I was just free. A strange thought occurred to me. The most generous thing I had ever done for my family wasn't paying their mortgage or clearing their debts. The most generous thing I had ever done was to walk away. I had given them the one gift they never knew they needed, the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet, to face the consequences of their own choices, to finally grow up. Whether they would take that gift and build something new with it, or squander it as they had squandered everything else, was no longer my concern. I used to think my value was tied to my bank account. I thought the more I gave, the more I would be loved. I believed that by solving all their problems, I was being a good son. I was wrong. I wasn't a son to them. I was a function, a resource to be exploited. Their silence about my life, my achievements, my struggles, it wasn't just forgetfulness. It was a fundamental lack of interest in who I was beyond what I could provide. You can't buy respect. You can't purchase love. And you certainly can't build a family on a foundation of financial transactions. Driving down the highway, with the sun on my face and my own music playing on the stereo, I realized the goal of this whole painful ordeal wasn't to punish them. It was to save myself. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. I hadn't lost a family. I had simply walked away from a toxic business arrangement that had been masquerading as one. I was finally living a life that was my own on my own terms. The $250,000 I had spent on them was a sunk cost, the price of a very expensive lesson. And the lesson was this: your self-worth is not determined by those who are unwilling to see it. It's determined by you. You set the price. You draw the lines. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe one day, years from now, we might find a new way to connect, one not based on dependency and lies. But I wasn't holding my breath. For now, the peace of my own quiet, uncomplicated life was more than enough. I had given myself a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has touched you in some way. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.